So anyhow, I want to welcome everybody, and this is our 14th year of celebrating Northwest Indiana green drinks, and we have a long legacy here. Actually started out with who's currently a senior lawyer with the Conservation Law Center. That was Kim Ferraro, and she started out at Shoreline Brewery. And then we had somewhat of a break, and Kathy Sippel started a group up in Valparaiso, Indiana. And then after that, we decided, well, actually, Dennis Britt decided we had to have one in Michigan City. So we did that for a while. COVID came, everything got disbanded or put on hold. And during that period, we decided to try the virtual format, and it's been extremely popular. And we continue doing it that way because everybody can go back and re-watch those videos that we put together. And that was probably the biggest request we had, why don't you record the sessions? I'm not able to get there. So anyhow, I want to acknowledge our sponsors, which are, of course, Northwest Indiana Green Drinks, Michigan City Sustainability Commission, Save the Dunes, and Northwest Indiana Region Resilience is definitely a big supporter of ours from the past and continues to be such, and that's Kathy Sippel's group. So, and they do have a website and also a Facebook page, and I recommend you go ahead and check them out. Okay, did I get everything, Em?
I think so.
Okay, good. I did it this time.
We'll do a
So I'm
little
going to give it to
housekeeping.
Em for some housekeeping details.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nancy. Hi, everyone. I'll just introduce myself since I think this is kind of a new group of people also from our traditional green drinks group. So I'm Em Racine. I'm the manager of communications and community engagement here at Save the Dunes, and I'm very happy to be here and celebrating Pride Month with all of you. So for light housekeeping, we do want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. Everyone is to remain muted throughout the presentation, but feel free to leave comments, questions, ideas in the chat. We do want to hear from you. We do want to have that conversation. And for all of those joining us on Facebook, thank you for watching as well. If you have questions or comments, feel free to leave those in the comment section underneath the live stream on Facebook. And CJ will present and we'll have some time at the end. So like I said, if you have any questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat. All right.
Brian, would you do us the honor of introducing CJ? Brian's muted, and so CJ muted.
There we go. Well, hi, folks. I only know a couple people here, but I'm so happy to be here. My name is Brian Forrest, and I call Michigan City home, but I spend most of my time at Indiana University Bloomington, where I'm on the faculty in Parks, Recreation, and the Outdoors. And I am joining tonight from Northern Michigan, where I am lucky enough to work at Keweenaw National Historical Park for my second summer. But the thing I'm really excited about is to be able to introduce somebody that I have so much admiration, respect, and love for. And that is my colleague and friend, CJ Greco. I've known CJ for 6 or 7 or so years, since we were both like in our early 20s.
Yeah,
And
track.
I first met CJ through the Out in Nature group, which creates a welcoming and safe space for LGBTQIA plus folks in the Chicagoland to spend time outdoors. And got to know what a remarkable human being CJ is through that. And that interaction that we've had has simply continued in really great ways. CJ, for work, is the teens program manager at the Lincoln Park Zoo, where they do some really wonderful things. And the Lincoln Park Zoo does some really great things in general. Um, in 2024, CJ was named one of the 30 under 30 by the North American Association for Environmental Education, making her someone I really want to be like when I grow up. And in 2023, I was a guest co-editor for a special issue of the journal Parks Stewardship Forum, in which it was an issue on LGBTQIA plus experience and expertise in the outdoors and conservation. CJ submitted a beautiful video about out in nature and a searingly poignant article about their experience in Australia and coming into their own identity. And then in last year, CJ was the guest editor of a special issue of the National Association for Interpretations, Legacy magazine, and that issue was on interpreting beyond the binary. So please welcome a person that I dearly love, and that is my friend CJ Greco.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna cry. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for the introduction. Yeah, like mentioned, I'm CJ. I'm gonna share my screen. I got a little slideshow situation. I'm because I'm on like a single screen Chromebook, I can't like see the chat and share my screen. So if somebody from Save the Dunes could like, if there's stuff in the chat, like questions or anything, let me know. Stop me anytime. Happy to answer. But specifically today, I wanted to chat about queer inclusion and conservation education. It's a really big part of who I am and what I do. But little agenda for today before we get really into it. So one, who the heck am I? What am I doing here? Number two, what do I do? What is queer inclusion? Number three, and how can we all work together to create queer inclusive spaces, especially during Pride Month like it is right now? So let's just jump right into it. So as mentioned a couple different times, my name is CJ Greco. I use they and she pronouns. I'm the teen programs manager at Lincoln Park Zoo. I put it on there twice. That's hilarious. Like Brian mentioned, I was honored with being a part of NAAA's Environmental Educators 30 Under 30 in 2024. I host a series of podcasts. I host a podcast called the Birdie Bunch Podcast. It was started during COVID. I can talk about it a little bit later. And a podcast more recently called Pigeon Held. I'm a nature outing leader with Indiana Dunes Birding Festival, Indiana Audubon, as well as the Urban Birding Festival and Chicago Bird Alliance. And I'm on the leadership team for an organization called Out in Nature, which is where I met Brian. So I will get into a couple of these different things as we move through today. Starting my journey, though, I found these pictures. I really like them because I think it's a good encapsulation of one, who I am, and two, who I've always been. So I was a zoo kid through and through, pretty much forever. I started my journey as a junior zookeeper at Cosley Zoo at 11 years old. And I essentially was volunteering, interpreting, talking to guests about animals, sharing stories about wildlife. One field trip that we did in that program, which was probably would have been in 2008, 2009, we took a field trip when I was 11 or 12 years old to Lincoln Park Zoo to meet the teens there. And I have that picture, right, with the teens at Lincoln Park Zoo, which is really cool. I sort of circled around myself. Once I entered high school when I was 14, I started with the Youth Volunteer Corps at Chicago Zoological Society or Brookfield Zoo, now called Brookfield Zoo Chicago. Always rocking those Kelly green polos you can see in the picture on the left. And just, I think being a zoo kid was so pivotal to really who I am and who I've always been in kind of framing what my values were. Valuing conservation, valuing the outdoors, valuing people and my peers, as well as just valuing the chance to explore and kind of understand myself and my peers in a different way in a very safe space. These spaces were cultivated for zoo kids. And so I was able to sort of grow in a ton of different various ways and find what my interests really were. For college, I went to the Illinois Institute of Technology and majored with a Bachelor's of Science in Humanities and a minor in Social Science. I initially started college. I had a big dream of being an architect. In high school, I took a bunch of design classes and CAD and engineering, and I had this dream of being a designer of zoo exhibits. And as soon as I started architecture school and they were teaching me about like HVAC systems, immediately uninterested, realized I'd be a much better client than an architect. The things that excited me about architecture was being creative and connecting with folks and telling a story. And that's what I really got to do with humanities, was telling stories. In college, I worked as a seasonal at Brookfield Zoo. I was a seasonal part-time educator, working with the youth volunteer corps I was in, became known as the King Conservation Science Scholars, which is still a program today. I helped sort of kind of get that program growing from what it was to something where it is today, which is really exciting. As well as I was in college, I was an education intern at Cosley Zoo. You can see the little hedgehog there. His name was Houdini. But I was still really engaged with conservation, even though my path had seemingly diverged, right? I was on this path of, I was going to go be an architect, but I didn't do that. And I was going to go do humanities, and I did. I studied humanities. I graduated with honors, and I still was doing all of these conservation things. It seemed like these two tracks didn't quite fit. Right in between my last semesters of college, I was working as a seasonal at Brookfield Zoo, and I was like, I need to do something new, need to do something different. I quit my job. I had this internship lined up in Australia. I was going to work for this nonprofit out of Melbourne. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to go, the organization let me know they didn't have funding for me to come, which is okay because it worked out the way it did. I spent every dime I had ever saved from childhood through college, which wasn't a lot of dimes. And I spent it, I already bought the plane tickets, so I went. I spent about 2 months backpacking in Australia by myself. It was really the first time I had ever been alone, right? I had all of these incredible experiences by myself. I spent my 22nd birthday in Australia. I was completely alone. Like, the only gift I got for my 22nd birthday was a keychain somebody at the hostel gave me because I told them it was my birthday. So, like, it was time spent intentionally with myself. It was time spent in a space that, one, I had no idea where I was or what I was doing. But two, it's a space where I was able to explore who I was in a very safe environment. Again, maybe it didn't seem safe because you think Australia, you don't think the most safe things. But again, it was safe. And also, it was safe in nobody knew who I was. I was just another random person. And I kind of used that to my advantage. This is about the time when I was starting to figure out who I was. I wasn't yet CJ at this moment. And in figuring out who I was, it required me to be alone and to be introspective. It required me to spend time with the earth. It required me to spend time with people and experiences that I had never had experience with. I think a lot about, like, again, during this time, I was figuring out that I was trans, and I guess I should have said that at the top in case you didn't notice. Hello, trans. But when I was figuring it out, I didn't know that I would be CJ yet. So I went into different coffee shops in Melbourne and trying on these different names. Who was going to get the coffee? Because if it was like awkward and weird, I never had to go back there again, right? And now I'm thousands of miles away, and they've probably never thought about me since. So it was safe in the sense that it was free of a lot of consequences. When you're growing up in the suburbs, or you're growing up in the city, or you're growing up in these places where people perceive you constantly. Yes, I was being perceived, but not by people who I had connections with. So it really allowed me to explore my identity in a significantly deeper way, while also being able to explore the world in a really beautiful way as well. Like, when else are you going to take 2 months to backpack in Australia? So that was in 2018. After that, I worked at Brookfield Zoo. Again, I was doing more seasonal programming. And I was graduating college, and I was looking for something more stable than a seasonal position. One thing that I really found that I loved when I was working at Brookfield Zoo was the connecting with youth, right? I was writing a lot of letters of recommendation. I was teaching them about their college applications or financial aid or building resumes. And it was something that I really connected with. So a job that I got out of college was doing college access with teens. supporting teens in high school. I worked at Waukegan High School for about 2 years during the pandemic. I started in February 2020. Great time to start working at a high school. March 2020 hit, immediately home for 2 years. And then I spent about a year in person with masks and like glass barriers between me and the students. But it was a really interesting time. And I think it really gave me perspective in understanding what young people now are going through. At the same time, I came out as non-binary in 2019 or 2018, and I came out like fully as like a trans person, like that's how I identified, was during the pandemic. Again, I feel like the pandemic, similarly to being in Australia, was a big time for introspection, not just for me, but for so many. It was a time when you were forced to sit at home alone with your thoughts just stuck. And so it was a time when I felt that I could safely come out. So I did. I became CJ and I was CJ. And one thing that I did, as many uh, uh, can relate to perhaps, uh, in losing anything in the pandemic, I worked at Brookfield Zoo. I was let go because seasonal educators weren't needed, right? They had other priorities as an institution. So what I did, and me and some friends, we started a podcast. We started the Birdie Bunch podcast. And the Birdie Bunch podcast from 2020, June 2020, when we started it, through, I think I recorded the last episode of the Birdie Bunch podcast in 2024. In those 4 years, it had almost 100,000 downloads. Like, it was a pretty notable conservation podcast. It's how I made a lot of connections. And one connection that I made was in the birding community. I'm now a big birder. I was a kind of a soft birder pre-pandemic, but now in the pandemic, it was a hobby that got me outdoors. You know, I think many people experienced mental health issues. I certainly did during the pandemic. And so what I did to combat that was get outdoors and go birding. And so it was a way for me to meet folks in the birding community through the podcast. And that connection is actually how I got a job at Lincoln Park Zoo. So Lincoln Park Zoo, I worked initially getting the job there. I was the student and teacher programs facilitator, and I was working doing like school programs, working teaching young people about urban wildlife and birding and connecting with nature at the zoo. And it was back to my roots in many, many ways of what I really wanted to do. And what I think I had always dreamed of doing is getting back at the zoo and doing programming. So what do I do now? I'm the teen programs manager. It's been a couple of years that I've been at Lincoln Park Zoo. Recently, June 1st was my Zooniversary, and I've hit 4 years at the zoo, which is really incredible. But what do I do as teen programs manager? I feel like that's kind of a vague title if you're not familiar with what teen programs are. So essentially, I work to sort of cultivate those same programs that I was in when I was a teen, right? I think what's kind of really special about the teen programs that I get to connect with is they're a little bit smaller than the programs I was in as a teen. Programs I was in, I think one of them was like 60 students was in it. 60 students were in the program at Cosley Zoo when I was young. And then at Brookfield Zoo, it was like 120 students. So our programs are significantly smaller. We can make really deep connections with young people. And it really, I think, allows me to share my experience, connect with them on a deeper level, and get them ready for what's after being a teen. The programs that I work with are really fun. We do interpretation, teaching teens how to talk to guests, increasing their public speaking skills. I help teens do research, which is really incredible. We've done things like bird banding and turtle trapping. We've done a lot of really fun programs that are very hands-on and engaging with young people. And it's something that inspires me every day is the young people I work with. But I think it's also the inverse, right? Where I'm inspirational to them and they're inspirational to me. We sort of power each other up in that way. But being a zoo educator isn't all that I do. I've loved nature in every aspect, not just the zoo. So what is Out in Nature? Brian also mentioned that at the top. I want to talk about that right now. So Out in Nature is, like Brian mentioned, a queer affinity space organization creating and cultivating safe and accessible outings for queer people in the Chicagoland region, in the outdoors specifically. So one thing that is maybe kind of unique to the queer community is a lot of the spaces that are designated spaces for queer folks are often spaces that can be limiting or can be inaccessible. I feel like folks often think about like clubs or parties. They think about like the Pride Parade. They're not often the most accessible thing, but the outdoors is for everybody, and it should be for everybody. And honestly, my interests don't align with going to clubs and parties. My interests align with going on a hike. So I really love working with Out in Nature as an organization, creating and cultivating these spaces. Something I really love. And I really have met some of my most wonderful, truest friends working with this organization, making these spaces. But what is an affinity space? I've used that word a couple of times. I'm just going to give you some definitions here. So, affinity space is a space to share feeling with people who have similar experiences. It celebrates us being who we are. It builds community, new bonds, relationships. And the biggest thing is it's combating exclusion, right? Especially with marginalized identities, with intersectional identities, spaces that are already exclusive, not exclusive like oh my god exclusive, but like non-inclusive, can be harder to break into for marginalized folks. So the outdoors is a really big one for creating these powerful affinity spaces. I have this image here on the screen. I like this image a lot because I think it's really impactful. I want to just ask, I don't know if we can pop in the chat and if somebody can read out the chat to me because I can't see it, what we think this image is.
Got you, CJ, if we get answers.
Amazing.
Well, Brian knows.
Yeah, I kind of figured Brian might know.
Freya's guess is anti-queer legislation, number of anti-trans laws, legislation against trans folks. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is you guys kind of nailed it. This is anti-queer legislation, anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation in the United States. So, you know, it's 2018, there were 19 bills that were anti-LGBTQIA, kind of grows to 25, not that big of a growth, kind of almost over doubles in 2020, and then doubles again in 2021. In 2022, it kind of grows a little bit more, 155 bills. In 2025, there were 616 anti-LGBTQ bills in the United States. Let's just sit in this for a second. When we're thinking about the importance of affinity spaces, we're thinking about creating spaces for folks who are experiencing marginalization. This is why. There are 616 bills as of last year that were attempted to be introduced that actively affected me and my identity. Now, 2026 is here. It's not 2025 anymore, CJ. What are you talking about? How many bills do we think have happened already? Half the year is over. How many bills we think in 2026? Any guesses?
1,000, 600, 500.
Yeah, it's about 600, and we're only in June. It's about 600, and we're only in June. We've met last year's quota already. Don't you worry. This is the experiences of queer folks in the United States right now. People are scared. People are angry. People are frustrated. People are sad. And I think so often about how I'm impacted, but more so, I think about how other members of my community are impacted. I'm very fortunate to have a really incredible community, and so much of my community is here today. So I really want to like shout you all out. But there are so many more queer folks who don't have that. There's queer folks who don't have the support. I have health insurance. I can go to therapy when I need to. Don't worry, I did on Monday. Like, this is the reality of being a person of who is queer in the United States. It is scary. And I think one thing that we think about when we think about the power of these affinity spaces is that it's not about like taking space. It's not about making noise. It's just about feeling safe, right? It's about affording people the same opportunities to explore who they are in a space that isn't going to judge them. There's a quote that I really like, and Brian was talking about the Park Stewardship Forum. Henry Adams, who's a friend of mine, illustrated this as the cover of that. But there's a quote that I really like, and I use it a lot because it's one of my favorites. But it's from a article in National Audubon Society during Pride Month by Benji Jones, and the quote is here: "A raccoon doesn't care who you're attracted to. A garter snake isn't going to question your gender, and a bird of paradise isn't going to raise an eyebrow at how you're dressed." Now, I like this quote a lot for a lot of reasons. I think it's very poignant, but also it's discussing this idea that a space that is historically kept, that is historically kept from queer folks as a space that is not safe to be in is a space that inherently wants to be safe, right? The raccoon doesn't care who you're attracted to. The garter snake's not going to question your gender. And if you've ever seen a bird of paradise, boy howdy, are they not going to raise an eyebrow at how you're dressed. So thinking about how we are relating to nature and how nature is relating to us, our space in nature, being out in nature, it's really, I think poignant is the word I want to use to think about the almost irony of it all, right? The space that isn't historically safe is wanting to be safe. But how can we continue to make inclusive spaces? Obviously, one thing that I do is making those spaces out in nature. I make spaces for young people to explore who they are, whatever form that means for them. But queer inclusive spaces can be made anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And I'm going to give you the anyhow right now. So the biggest thing is it's not about tolerating queer folks. It's about affirming who they are. I think a lot of people think about like, maybe this isn't as common of language as it is now as it was a few years ago, but I think neutrality is no longer an option when there are over 600 bills in 6 months that limit my existence. I have trans siblings in other states who've had their driver's license revoked. I can't go get a new passport to travel abroad. Like, tolerance and neutrality are no longer options when it comes to existing with the queer community right now. The next thing that anyone can do to create queer inclusive spaces is just normalize queer experiences. I like this image here. This is from the Field Museum in Chicago. If you've been to the Field Museum, maybe you've seen Sue the T-Rex. There's a bunch of signs, but they don't know what sex Sue was. It was a dinosaur. So Sue uses they, them, or it, its pronouns because they don't know what Sue was. They were around 65 million years ago, so they refer to Sue the dinosaur with they, them, or it, its pronouns, right? And that's just normalizing queer experiences, right? If I gave a gender to Sue the T-Rex, it would be kind of weird because we don't want to assume, right? But also, it would be weird in not that we want to assume way, but also you might look at that and you might see a like strong, powerful female leader, or you might see like a dominant alpha male. But at the end of the day, that's a they, them. The last way we can continue to create queer inclusive spaces, and this is my favorite one, I have a big smile on my face, is spaces just like this. It's uplifting, it's celebrating queer people all year round. Not just during Pride Month, queer people exist every month of the year, but we're especially loud right now. I say that knowing full well, not everyone can be fully loud right now. Like I said, it's scary to exist as a queer person right now. And existing, being alive, being celebratory, being loud right now is an act of resistance against oppression, right? Queer people just experiencing joy, right? The big smile on my face that you all are here with me today. It is in spite of those who would put me down. That's all that I have. I can put this up back at the end with like specific comments and stuff to reach out to me. But I mostly want to open it now to be question and answer and connect with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, but happy to share that back at the end if you'd like to connect in other spaces. I know that was pretty quick moving through stuff, but I'm happy to answer questions and have a conversation. I think that's a really big part of kind of what this is.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks.
all so much.
Thanks, CJ. Anyone has questions? The chat's been mostly just conversations, topics, exchanges, information, things like that. All good offerings. If someone wants to raise their hand in the chat, I can ask you to unmute if we want to do that instead of just chat. And we didn't have any questions posted on Facebook either, so are we at? Okay, Gary, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you so much, CJ, and that was
Yeah.
amazing. And coming from a position of a ally,
Hmm.
what can we do, especially right now, knowing that it's not safe or
Totally.
even some points reasonable for the queer community to just I can move through spaces much easier
Yeah.
right now than
100%.
other.
Yeah, I think like actions to take is, I think, one, like being here and being cognizant of like privilege is a huge deal. Like knowing that you can move through spaces. I think it's important to like stand up where you can. And I mean that more in the sense of like if you see something, and not in like a narc way, if you see something, say something, but like if somebody is being actively impacted, find ways to support them, right? If it is the thousands of like homeless trans people, right? Supporting people. If it's queer people, experiencing an act of hate, stepping in as an ally, right? I'll be fully honest and transparent. This past week, I've experienced hate, and so I don't want to like normalize it, but it is a thing that people are experiencing every single day. There are people in my life who I spoke to constantly who I don't speak to anymore because they don't want to talk to me, just because I'm me. And I think as like an ally, it is affirming and continuing to validate folks, just for existing, especially right now. Like you being here, you listening is huge, but even just like creating these spaces is a big deal. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not. I feel like I went on a little tangent, but thank you.
Thanks, CJ. And you can raise your hand if you have another question. Okay, Riz, go ahead.
Thank you again so much, CJ. It's
Yeah.
really great to hear your story. And oh man, I never use Zoom, so let me lower that. But yeah, similarly to you, kind of experienced a lot of these feelings in the pandemic and really came to terms with that kind of gender identity. But it took me a much longer time to be out in, as a non-binary person
Mhm.
in public. And so I'm curious, and I think maybe you touched on some of this, but
Yeah,
what helped you become, maybe more confident and stepping out and
yeah.
owning that identity?
Yeah, I can talk to that. Absolutely. Thanks for that question. I think it's a thing that I struggle with every single day is confidence, right? Even me being on this call with you all right now, it took some level of confidence to be here and share part of my story and be vulnerable. Um, and I think it's at the end of the day, it's not just like a trans issue is confidence. It's not just a queer issue is confidence. It's an everybody issue is confidence. But not everybody, a lot of people get the support they need to be confident, right? They get validated in that. If they're trying a new hat, hey, cool hat. Not everyone's getting validation for taking risks. And that can look like anything. That doesn't have to be gender identity exploration. That doesn't have to be some identity of queerness. Not everybody in general is getting validated for taking risks in their life. That risks that they want to see, risks that are positive for them. Being confident is hard and it's scary. And I think, like I said, when you're in those spaces that feel safe to you in whatever moment that is, maybe hypothetically you're in another country and you can go into random coffee shops and give them fake names. I think there's some level of privilege attached to safety and confidence. But I also think at the end of the day, it's everybody has to work together on it. It's you can't no one can be confident on their own. It takes validation, it takes support, in whatever form that is. Um, and I think I sort of like the theme of my talk today is it's titled queer inclusion and conservation education, but at the end of the day it's inclusion, period. Like queer inclusion is inclusion for everybody. At the end of the day, inclusion in general is what makes the spaces in general feel more welcoming to everybody, not just queer folks. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
Feel free to raise your hand and I'll ask you to unmute if you have another question. Do I have anyone else? I don't think I'm missing anybody.
I think Freya has a hand raised.
Oh, do you? Where? I don't see Freya on here. Hold on.
On the Zoom.
Yeah, I don't. Am I missing you?
I might be able to. I have powers.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Did it work?
Hi. Hi, CJ.
Hi,
Thank
Fran.
you for sharing some of your stories. You all, I've known CJ for several years, and there are some very cute photos in there of young CJ that I haven't had the joy of seeing before. Bouncing off Riz's question, I'm wondering what your favorite ways of being validated are. So
Yeah.
so you and I have sat next to each other in a big talk at a bird festival, and I remember reflecting that you were the most validating person in that room. To the
Yeah.
person giving the talk, nodding and smiling and like laughing really loudly and just nodding along the whole time.
Right.
Is that the sort of validation that you appreciate? Or are there
Yeah,
other, I mean, you're not always giving a big talk. So like
totally.
what other ways can people validate you and help you boost your
Yeah,
confidence?
totally. That's a great question, Freya. One, thank you for being here. But also, I think a lot about just everybody's going to have different ways they want to receive validation. It's like the love languages thing, which is not like I think it's I think everybody receives all types of love, but it's also a thing of just, I'm a big proponent of active listening because if I'm not actively engaged, like, yes, oh my God, totally. I'm nodding my head, I'm engaged. I struggle to pay attention. So I have to do that to pay attention. And I think it's very validating as like a side effect, right? Because like, oh, you're affirming what I'm saying. Absolutely. You're clocked in. Incredible. But I mean, even one thing that I just personally do in my life, it's not even like I'm doing it consciously. But if I see like, oh my gosh, hey, I really like your nails. Your nails are really cool this week. Or like, oh my God, you changed your hair. I love it. Just like, it can be so simple and small. And I think it could also be someone's like, maybe like kind of hide they did this big change, but they're like, no one's going to notice it. If somebody notices it, it's positive, right? Because it's so often like, oh my gosh, you did that thing. Boo, tomato, tomato, tomato. No, I don't want that. I want validation. So for me, it's just being positive. It's being joyful. I have experienced a lot of mental health in my life, mental health issues in my life, and depression is something I struggle with constantly in my life. And it's not a way to combat depression. It's a way to treat it, is with just trying my best to experience joy, even if it's pretend joy. And so part of that joy for me is sharing it with others, right? Like, oh my gosh, did you see this cool thing? There was a least bidder at work today, and I got to point it out to some strangers on the boardwalk. It was a great day because I got to talk about birds. So I think for me, validation can look in a million different ways. And I feel like this is not answering your question, so I'm so sorry. But it looks like to me, it's as simple as, hey, I like your nails. Hey, I like your shoes. It's as complicated as sitting deeply and listening to somebody as they're talking about what they're feeling.
Go ahead, Brian.
I just want to sort of amplify what CJ says about joy. And it is contagious. If we are excited about things, and when I'm outdoors, can't not be excited. There's just too much
Yeah,
weird and wonderful stuff and some
totally.
really queer stuff out there too that is just so interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that that joy is infectious, but also in a world where so many influences think we can't experience joy. Um, Countering that is a political act. And um, rage and joy are really similar to each other.
Yeah, definitely so. I think a lot about, I was lamenting is the word I'm going to choose to use, about some of the things that people have said to me in the past few weeks. Leading into Pride Month, it is a beautiful month for queer people. Pride Month to be so joyful, but it's also a very scary month as we are the most visible. And I was lamenting to someone about all of the things that I've been receiving, and they were like, "Well, just like put them on blast, like post their names, post their whatever, like." And to me, my instinct reaction was, well, that's just doing what they're doing, right? It's just being hateful to being to. It's like responding with the hate to the hate. And I'm not saying respond to hate with love. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, even like it's not love, it's joy. I'm joyful right now, even though I've experienced a bunch of stuff. And I think joy can come from anywhere. For me, joy is the outdoors, joy is my friends, joy is my family, joy is people on this call with me listening. Joy is seeing the sun shining and it's not 100 degrees. Joy is seeing a cool bird. Joy is petting my dog. Joy is as simple as a million different things and as complicated as a million others. At the end of the day, right now, the biggest thing that queer people can do to without allyship, the biggest thing a queer person can do is just be joyful, right? With allyship, you can, grow beyond that, but it's hard to be queer. And I gave you a bunch of reasons why it's hard to be queer, but being joyous despite the difficulty is what I'm all about. Again, depression is my default emotion, but at the end of the day, I try to at least find one smile, even if it's looking at my silly little dog or looking at a cool bird or eating something really tasty. It can be whatever that looks like for you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Riss.
So you mentioned working with kids a lot.
Yeah,
I've also been a camp counselor for like some
totally.
leadership kids programs,
Love
and
it.
you know, in the last couple of years, we've had some youth LGBTQ programming. And I'm originally from Northwest Ohio, and so, kind of similar to, a lot of Indiana in terms of politics and perspectives that people might
For sure.
have. But more and more over the years, more kids are coming up to those of us who are visibly queer at these places
Yeah.
and being like, thank you for being visibly queer. And I'm not trained in how to, talk about that to
Yeah.
children, right? And
Yeah.
especially in this day and age of people kind of trying to claim that the queer community is, sick in certain ways. I'm just curious maybe how you have approached
Mm,
having conversations with kids, who are
totally.
maybe either having those thoughts about
Yeah.
themselves or are looking to be allies or who are actually
Yeah.
the opposite of being allies, just the whole spectrum. So just
Yeah.
curious how you've kind of approached that.
I'll say I've been very fortunate in my career where I really haven't had a lot of youth that I work with who are the opposite of allies. I've had some neutral youth, but I've never had like antagonistic. And again, that's fortunate for working with youth, as many of you might know. Youth can really vary. But I want to say too, hate at its core, just like love, is something that is taught, right? And when you are a young person, you are still learning everything. And I say young person, you might think 3, 4, you might think middle school, still is high school, right? You're still developing. High schoolers are at such a unique point in their life because they're really determining what their values are. And on top of that, they're determining who they are, right? not only their values for others, but their values for themselves. It's a pivotal point in developing identity, is being a teenager, right? As someone who's gone through puberty twice, and the context is I've been on like hormone replacement therapy for being trans. Let me tell you, puberty is crazy. It's wild. You experience all the emotions all the time, everywhere. And young people are going through that all the time, and it's so scary. And so being just an open, honest person. If a teen asks me a question, I'm going to tell them the real answer. I think it is hard to be a teen, just like it's hard to be a queer person, right? There's a lot of things going against teens right now, right? Like teens might never get to buy homes. They might never collect Social Security. There's things that young people don't even know about that they're impacted by. I think a lot about, especially with young people. There's a program that we did at the zoo a few years ago. It was called Safe Space in Nature, and we collected some evaluations from this program. And one of the evaluations was like a note from the kids, and they were like, I've been to a lot of offices, I've been to a lot of places, and I've never seen this many pride flags just like hung up in the office. And like that's not even like a thing that we were doing for this event. Safe Space in Nature was intentionally like showing like queer and allied youth that it's like safe to explore the outdoors. And we had all these queer scientists come and talk about their experiences. The flags in the office were not part of it. That was just up for people to like live with. And I think about that a lot because, where I work, there's a lot of really incredible allyship happening. It's not perfect, but no place is perfect. But I'll be honest, I say this to everybody, it's the best place I've ever worked in terms of being inclusive for queer folks. I feel like when I get asked questions by young people, and I hope this is getting closer to your answer, Riz, when I get questions from young people, I am deliberately honest to a point, right? I am very transparent with being trans. I love being trans. It's the best thing I ever did for my mental health is being transgender. I feel so emotionally free. I'm not scared to be a person except against all the laws that are against me. I was scared to be a person before, right? And well, I don't want to like trigger anybody because that is a real fear here. But in 2017, I attempted suicide. So like that is like a real thing that I experienced because I couldn't live with who I was. I don't feel that way now because I love myself now. I think a lot about how I show up for people, whether that is in the spaces I create or in the programs that I'm working with at my work. But how I show up is myself. And that's the best I can do. You're welcome.
Gonna say, CJ, definitely make sure you're reading all the comments in the
Should I
chat.
get in there? Should I get in the comments?
Well, just good, nice things about you and
Oh man.
of
Oh
joy
geez.
and lots of things to share. So it's
Oh,
it's all
incredible.
good things.
I appreciate you all. Thank you, my friends. Incredible. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer. Again, I wanted this to be very like free-form conversational because I think that's the best way to understand what you want to know in the safest way possible, I guess.
CJ,
Yeah.
if I could please ask you, Brian had shared with us a publication that you had in one of the journals.
Yes.
And I'm curious as to what that was about.
Sure.
And if you could share with us some of the learnings from that.
Sure, absolutely.
And if there's things in there that many of us who work, in the field of conservation and
totally
are happiest in nature.
Yeah. I'm happy to share that, Nancy. Thanks for your question. So what Brian alluded to was I believe it was in 2023. There was a special issue of the Park Stewardship Forum specifically dedicated to LGBTQIA plus, yeah, May 2023, specifically dedicated to LGBTQIA experiences in the outdoors. And something that I submitted, I was a part of a group that submitted a video for Out in Nature, which is still there. You can go watch it. It's great. Makes me cry every time I watch it. But the other thing that I submitted was a short story that I had written. Um, it's mostly just a retelling of some experiences that I had while I was in Australia. I called it Greco in Oz, and essentially it was talking about like how I was recovering with mental health stuff and how like a decision that I made is I wanted to travel and the experiences that I had traveling. Some of those experiences were really safe and welcoming. People inviting me on trails and trips with them to be inclusive, and other things less so. I'll say, and again, this is not a testament to the safety of Australia. I'll always recommend people go to Australia, but Australia is where I first experienced being a victim of a hate crime. So like that's a real thing that I experienced, and that was one of my first experiences ever as a queer person, was being visibly queer and almost immediately being a victim of a hate crime. And that's the reality for being a queer person, is your safety has to be paramount. Um, that article kind of talks about joy and finding myself through the ups and the downs. And I believe it's free to access. So if you just Google Park Stewardship Forum May 2023 LGBTQ experiences in the outdoors, you should be able to find it. Oh, Brian.
I put a link to your article in the chat. You know,
Thanks,
CJ,
Brian.
there's one thing in that article that just has never left me, and it's simple, but I think
Yeah.
it may also speak to the allyship thing that Gary was asking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was that you were on this backpacking trip
Yes.
and you're the leader, and I don't really remember anything about the leader
Yeah.
except that they looked at you, saw what may have been your
Yeah.
name, but
Totally.
simply said, "Here, see," and rather than forcing you into a dead name or a name that just doesn't fit your identity,
Mhm.
that person cared enough or was thoughtful enough that they let that go.
Yeah.
And by calling you C, I think it allowed you, as in
Yeah.
my reading, it allowed you to say, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
who I can be."
Definitely an aha moment.
That's the piece that really struck me from that lovely article.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, we can do some announcements and see if anybody
Yeah,
has any other questions
totally.
doing in the meantime. I think I failed to mention this in the original housekeeping, but we do share all of the recorded meetings on our Save the Dunes YouTube page. So if, you will get that up sometime early next week, hopefully, and then we can share it out with your networks or with your colleagues or community members that would benefit from hearing this great presentation and feeling the joy that's curated in spaces that are, facilitated to do that. So thank you so much, CJ.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I just have a quick couple of event announcements from Save the Dunes.
Amazing.
We have a native container gardening workshop happening this Saturday here at the Barker House in Michigan City. It is specifically geared for folks who have lack access to traditional gardening spaces, so maybe live in apartments or condos and want to practice native plantings in containers for their outdoor spaces. So I could drop a link to all of our event page in the chat here if anyone wants to see what we've got coming up. And then later this month on June 20th, Save the Dunes will be celebrating our 74th anniversary with an anniversary open house here at the historic Barker House in Michigan City, and that's a morning soiree that will have coffee and breakfast treats and things beginning at 10 a.m. on the 20th. But as I mentioned, here's the event page in the chat, and we take our customary green drinks break next month for July, so we won't be having a presentation next month, but stay tuned for August and the rest of the year besides December. So we're always bringing fun, exciting, impactful environmental stories to you guys here on Zoom, and we're really happy that everyone was able to join us tonight.
Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Happy Pride Month.
Anything from you, Nancy, that you need to
Oh,
share?
just thank you everybody for being here. CJ, you've given me courage to go out and be my usual open self. And I'll
Yay.
have to say this year has been one that I felt myself pulling back, and especially looking at June. But I'm not going to let society and what other people think put me back in the closet again. So just thank you for your openness and your vulnerability. Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate being invited for this. So thank you so much, Nancy. I appreciate you all. Thanks, everybody.
We'll hopefully talk to most of you soon. And again, have a happy Pride Month. And
Yeah, everybody.
thank you, everyone.
Oh, Pride in Michigan City. Do we have the date?
Yes, that is Saturday, June 13th. If you're a Michigan City local or Northwest Indiana folks, it's from 1 to 8 at Washington Park in Michigan City on Saturday, June 13th.
And it is the biggest festival in Michigan City all year long. So everybody's welcome. It's a wonderful event. And they do offer free tables to the nonprofits. So if you know anybody's interested, Daisy Lee, who's a city council woman and our greatest ally, is the one to contact for that.
That's great. Wonderful. Well,
Nobody wants to leave.
yeah, everybody wants
Having too much fun.
We're having too much fun. Yeah, too much joy.
Too much joy. No such thing. Bye, everybody.
Bye.